Hello and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It is a very good morning because I am being fueled by my AG1.
Oh yeah. AG1. AG1. We love our AG1 here at the Bass household. We're big fans every day. AG1. Part of my routine.
It's almost no need to even tell listeners because I feel like everybody is on board. I get nothing but positive feedback. But let's all celebrate together. Athleticgreens.com/surf for all of your dietary nutritional needs. They ship it to your house. It's 1 scoop of powder in 8 ounces of water. You take it daily. They recommend doing it on an empty stomach, which I'm doing right now at 7 a.m. And set it and forget it and be healthy.
You know, we have a lot of, we have a few long-term friends of the show / sponsors, and AG1 is one of them. And I probably get more questions about AG1 than anything else.
Because it's universal. Everybody wants to be healthy.
Right.
So athleticgreens.com/surf will answer all of your questions and help you find optimal nutrition. Need Essentials is another long-term one. They just sent me an email yesterday, I believe, advertising some new products that are in store.
Oh.
A surf hat with a flap that goes down the back to protect your neck if you're in the tropics or anywhere warm. That'll keep you completely free of sunburn.
Right on.
New duffel bag as well. And I know a lot of retailers, not just retailers, but other companies and brands, especially in Southern California, are struggling due to shipping constraints and supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Go to needessentialsusa.com. Odds are they have what you need. I don't know that they have everything in stock, but they have everything that I've needed in the last couple of months every time I've gone. So,
you know what I got sent in the mail? One of these.
Oh, snap.
One of these.
Oh, I've got those too.
One of these Prima long wooden beautiful fins, and I think you might have done a Surf Splendor podcast with them. They sent me this. I've got your stickers. They wanted me to tell you. They sent
incredible. Clinica.
They sent me your. Anyway, I know this isn't an ad for Clinica, but I wanted to thank them for the kind gesture. That was very nice of them. Thank you.
What is that fin? 14 inches? I think it's huge.
If you can't ride the nose on this bad boy.
That thing is huge.
It's pretty cool. It's really neat fin.
Yeah. So Clinica is a retailer in Israel. Arthur Rashkovan is the owner. Yeah. And he's worked in the surf industry as like a sales rep for a number of years, and then opened a retail shop in Hilton Beach, Tel Aviv, which is pretty interesting little story about surf culture there.
Yeah, I was very interested when I got something from Israel in the mail. I was like, wow, what's this?
I know. All the effort that he put into getting that here too.
Yeah.
And then of course, Real Water Sports is our retail surfboard partner, not just surfboards. They've got all sorts of stuff. I was on their website last week looking at boards. They had a discount section, and it was up to, I think, 28% off on certain boards. Some of them are like 8%, little discount, but 28% off boards, which amounts to $200 essentially. Lost, Super Brand, all sorts of Smith shapes. There was a bunch of stuff on there. So go check them out if you need a board. And if you don't, go check them out just to fantasize. Peruse at realwatersports.com.
Yes. My good friend Trip Foreman at Real Water Sports. And of course, you and I are big fans, and that's the place to go if you're a hardcore surf hardware enthusiast.
Realwatersports.com.
All right. Well, hey, friggin' guy. Welcome, everybody. It's Spit. It is the Spit podcast. It's Wednesday morning. We need to be alive and vibrant and robust and ready to meet the beautiful day outside. And I think I will tell you that it's March 9th, the year 2022. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Where does the time go? Last week you were talking about a way that the WSL could show support for Ukraine, not the Ukraine, but for Ukraine, would be printing Ukraine flags on the jerseys for the Portugal event.
Yeah.
They did not do that, but you know what they did do? Taking a page right out of your book, was in support of International Women's Day, which was yesterday. in preparation for it, in advance of it, they told surfers, male and female, to pick the names of female athletes who they admire or are inspired by. And so all the surfers had those names on the back of their jersey rather than their own names.
Yeah, that's right out of page right out of my book, as you mentioned. So that's cool.
Did you know they were doing that? And is that how you came up with the Ukraine idea?
No, I had no idea.
Crazy.
I had no idea. But I think
isn't that
that's
crazy?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, who would you put? Like I would put my mother probably on there. I mean, who? But there
what was
are
her
so
sport
many.
Of choice?
Oh, they had to be sporting women.
I don't know. It seemed to be that was the common denominator.
Yeah. Who's the greatest woman in the history of? I'm reading a great book on Genghis Khan. That's right, Genghis, not Genghis, Genghis. And his empire, the Mongol Empire, for a solid 10 years was ruled by Mongol women.
Really? I didn't know that. Like after he died?
Yeah, after he died, there was a lot of politicking about who was going to rule who. And at one point, all of Genghis Khan's sons died. And there was like this, they all get together in this sort of they kind of hooey up. It's called a Kurultai. They get together to determine who's going to be the next Khan or the great Khan or who's going to lead the empire. And at one point there was like 3 or 4 women that were like, throughout, even in Genghis Khan's time, the women were administrators. Like the men went off and did the warring, and the women were back at home, basically like, auditing all the stuff that was coming in and basically running the empire, doing all the stuff that had to be done, schooling the children, all of that stuff. And so they were great administrators. And at one point, there was kind of a void of males. And so the women got together and were like, okay, each one of the women wanted their son to be the next Khan. So they kind of took control and ran it and politicked the situation and moved the pieces of the puzzle around so that eventually one of their sons would be the next Khan. And, this book's fascinating because what it says is, look, we know Genghis Khan is this incredibly savage human being who's horrible, and that's through the prism, sort of the lens of, 18th, 16th century, 17th century, 18th century historians and authors. And this book says, well, look, he wasn't really that bad. Look at all the incredibly progressive things he did. He had women in charge of government. He stopped the kidnapping of women as your wife. He did all of these things and back then the Kong tribes were, the Mongol tribes were very much like, hey, if you're my son, you're going to be next in charge, no matter how stupid or lame you may be. And Genghis Khan was like, no. He would go in, like wipe out villages, but if you paid homage to him and subjugated to him, he would be like, dude, you're really good at this. I want you to be my next in command. He would like take guys from old armies that he'd conquered and put them as his next in command. He was just like, who's ever the best. It was quite a meritocracy is what I'm saying. Yeah. And even his sons and his offspring, he'd be like, you're lame. Go over there and plow the fields. I don't want you even near me. Like basically, if you're good, you're going to get a spot in my government. Meritocracy. One of the other things that he did.
It's relatable. Like you try to provide the best life for your kid, right? These are things that I think about now. Comfort, all this thing, but ultimately that's going to lend or allow them to be lazy, lethargic, not a hard worker, all this sort of stuff. And so, yeah, if you're running a business or an empire, they're not equipped to continue the legacy of it. But some kid who had to struggle is probably better equipped and more appreciative and all that sort of stuff. So that's who you would want in control. But how do you do that? Yeah. How do you provide your son with comfort, opportunity, resource, and still have them be a go-getter?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think you say no a little bit more than yes.
I'm going to start today.
Yeah, well, I can speak from my kids are both go-getters, and my wife and I, we look at each other and we're like, how did that happen? And we spoiled the living shit out of them. But they both are doing what it is they want to do, and they're seeking it aggressively. They're not, at home playing video games.
And the good thing is allowing them to seek it aggressively from an elevated space where they have opportunities to pursue things that aren't that could be kind of more passion based, like they're not seeking just to get by. They're seeking something that might provide them fulfillment in a way beyond just financial security.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
So back to Genghis Khan real quickly. When the women, when the
we're
women were
boring. I'm personally boring listeners right now. Fast
when the
forward a
women
few
were
minutes.
ruling, when the women were ruling the roost, were they as savage?
No, it was actually kind of a 10-year period of relative peace.
Okay.
They were trying to kind of get all of the ducks in order, everything lined up. But once the one son, took over, he then, went on it. There was no doubt that they were extremely savage. The Mongol Empire was extremely. One of the other things they did is that they just let any religion, they weren't sort of tempered or put in a tunnel of religion. Like that, many of them were Christians, many of them were Buddhists, many of them were Jewish. Like they were just they were like, any religion you want, we don't care. And basically because they were like, the true God is a Mongol God, whether he's Buddhist or Christian or whatever. I mean, and their whole thing was, look at us, we're dominating the earth. Our empire is incredible. So God must be on our side. That was sort of their rationalization.
You create less opposition if you don't limit it by religion.
And Genghis Khan would change. Like sometimes he was Christian, and he would also bring in these people to debate each other. He's like, I want you, and he would ask them questions, like he would have like a Jewish guy, a Hindu guy, a Buddhist guy, a Christian guy, whatever. And they'd all come in and he'd go, tell me, who is the real God, blah, blah, blah. And he would have like these really structured debates where he would give them points and stuff. And, eventually at the end, they all just got extremely drunk and just fell asleep.
Yeah. Who knew? Seeker of truth.
Quite a lot of alcoholism running through that whole situation.
Probably helps you deal with the atrocities and the horrors. What's the name of the book?
It's called Genghis Khan, the Maker of Culture, or something like that. I think it's Jack Weatherford is the author. It might be. I can never get the. I'm just reading the book, but I should look at the
cover.
The cover.
Good enough. People can find it based on that. So the big event, the big news from last time you and I recorded was they ran the entirety of the Portugal event.
Yeah.
The Rip Curl presents Mayo Pro, or the Mayo presents the Rip Curl Pro, something like that, in Portugal. And then there's also something presented by Corona. So lots of sponsors involved in this event. I will start our conversation by saying, wow, what a letdown after Hawaii. No matter who does what in the air, nor what rivalries or storylines develop, it is nowhere near as compelling as putting surfers in big, harrowing surf. Turn on the broadcast. It started at about 4 a.m. for us, sometimes a little bit earlier. So I would sleep until 6 or 7, wake up, watch the rest of the event, watch the highlights, and just go, holy cow, these highlights are lowlights. There's nothing to highlight. This is like an average session at the pier down the street from me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I watched some of it. It was hard to watch because of the time change, as you mentioned, and I watched some of it, and I found myself engaged more because I was in survival league or because I had a fantasy team than because, I can't wait to watch them surf Portugal. That wasn't whereas in Hawaii, as you mentioned, we're more like, hey, it's going to be, 8 to 12 foot pipe. This is going to be insane. Like we were watching it for the waves, and this, goes back to what I've been saying for 15 years or whatever it is, that the waves are the stars,
There's no question in my mind. We kind of harp on it, but the energy level during the Hawaii events, even when the event was off, in the evening after the event, in the morning leading up to the event, when you and I are sitting here recording, the energy is palpable. There's this kind of reverberation that exists around those events. The stark contrast that existed between that and Portugal, it was like, you and I care deeply. I could barely muster interest, even with the survival pick and all that kind of stuff. It was like, geez, those waves literally look like what I'm going to go surf today. And now I'm just going to go surf because this isn't nearly compelling enough to keep me engaged. So I think that's a big problem. And it's not the first time. Like, we understand this really well. We've been experiencing this for years, talking about it for years. Time to pivot away from this. Full stop. No question.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking, you mentioned the survival thing. And so what made me chuckle a bit was that the round of 32 is the most interesting round for me.
Yeah,
The round of
totally.
32, I was like, because I had Idla, and I forget who Idla was surfing against, but anyway, I was all about the round of 32. And then I knew you had Kanoa, so I was watching the Kanoa heat, and I don't think I watched the Kanoa heat. I might have, but
No, because you asked me if he made it or not.
yeah.
But
But
yeah, you're right. It's more interesting than this final series.
and I didn't watch the final day at all. I mean, the whole thing finished before I woke up. I think it was,
It did.
yeah.
But if you watch the
So,
highlights, it was the worst day of competition.
oh really? Yeah, I didn't even watch it. I was a bit, as I did text you about the Baron Mamia heat, and I guess you disagree with me, but I thought Baron Mamia did a pretty incredible one maneuver wave aerial that I thought, you know, deserved a higher score,
They gave him a
frankly.
4.73 on it. So Baron Mamia versus Jordy Smith. Jordy surfed kind of more traditionally open carves, like big carves, combinations of maneuvers. And he got mid-range fives for it. The waves weren't big. I'd say even the set waves were shoulder high. Baron Mamia got a long left that by the time he hit the air section, it was knee high, maybe ankle high, but he did the best air you could possibly do on a knee high wave. And it was a full rotation backside three, spin, landed it clean, and they gave him a 4.73.
So I guess, the commentators were mentioning, hey, that's what the judges are looking for. They said before the heat started today that they were looking for big progressive maneuvers. Are you telling me that the size of the wave was the reasoning behind the low score, or they just went back on their initial?
I absolutely think it was the size of the wave and the size of the section.
And then you told me that you sent me a text and said, hey, the surfer that deserved to win. I forget exactly how you phrased it, but it's a phrase you often use when I
The right
text.
surfer made the heat.
Yeah, the right surfer made it through. So explain that to me, because are you telling me that? Well, explain that. Explain that to me. Why do you think that?
When you look back at the heat with hindsight, Jordy Smith was the better surfer in that heat, and he made it through the heat. So in the midst of the heat, you can be squabbling over these little scores. And and by the way, that's also part of what happens when you're surfing, when you're running in mediocre surf, is you're going to be squabbling over fractional scores within the 5 to 6 point range. And that we all know the judging is not objective enough to really leave it in those hands.
Yeah.
There's too much subjectivity to allow for it to be that fractional. Anyways, what I meant by that is, while you're squabbling over it in real time, with the benefit of hindsight, you could look back, look at the two waves and go, okay, Jordy was the better surfer on those two waves. That's all.
What about the concept of so to me, Jordy's heat feels like 3 to the beach.
It does. You're right.
And Barron's, and we all know every surfer on this tour can do 3 to the beach. And Barron's wave just seemed way more, his surfing seemed more progressive. Like, do we really want to, are we lowering our standard if it's just like, hey, 3 big turns to the beach wins no matter what, or wins over a very hard to do, difficult, challenging, progressive maneuver, a one wave maneuver? It just feels to me that, like, I look at it like, look, everyone can kind of do what Jordy did, and Jordy surfed great, by the way. And I'm a big Jordy fan. I want Jordy to be in the top 5. But I guess part of me was like, earlier, a couple of weeks ago or last week, I said, look, the pressure is really on the guys that did well in Hawaii, especially the Baron Mamias and the Seth Monizes, who we know can do good in Hawaii. Can they translate that now as we go on the CT and have to deal with, sketchy conditions or not as good of waves as we mentioned? That's where I felt like the pressure was. And I felt like Baron Mamia lived up to the pressure. Like he went out there and did an incredible small wave maneuver. And I was just disappointed. I felt like Baron did what it took to advance surfing through the eyes of the world.
Yeah, this is a valid argument. It was the wave that Baron picked. When Baron's racing down the road on that wave and there's no critical section at all, I knew before he even went to the air, no matter what he does at the end of this wave, it's not going to net an important score. Whereas Griffin Colapinto actually got a 10 for doing a similar air, but it was on a set wave on a critical section, and that made all the difference in the world. Idolo did it on a closeout, also just this hucking section that he just goes into lip. So that's what mattered, I think.
So Baron's section wasn't hucking, it wasn't pounding, it wasn't powerful. It was
a gutless wave,
crumbly at the. Okay, so
yeah, it was a small gutless left that he was racing down to the end section on that you just knew no matter what he does, it's not going to be.
It wasn't critical.
But so to that kind of the contrast of that was Jordy. He did do maneuvers that everybody else on tour can do, but he did them on a set wave in the critical section to a degree that was more significant than anything that Baron was doing, and that's all that it came down to.
Yeah.
But your argument still stands, and they did stay true to that argument by giving Griffin a 10 when he did it.
Yeah. All right.
And I don't think that anybody argued against that 10. I think it was all the judges had a 10 on their scorecard. All of us watching it recognized it was 2 to 3 points better than anything else that we had seen, certainly throughout that day. So I think this judging this was the first air event on tour, and the judging reflected that,
Yeah. All right.
But a couple of other storylines that are worth discussing. You talk about having Idolo as your survival pick, which was a great pick. And that's who I was thinking I should have picked instead of Kanoa to save Kanoa for another event. But Kanoa made it through as well. This is the first season where I feel like Felipe looks better than Idolo. When we're having that conversation about those three Brazilians in the top 5, Gabe, Idolo, Felipe, to me, it was always kind of Gabe by a nose, Idolo in second, and Felipe didn't quite have all of the tools that those guys have, certainly in big waves. This is the first season where I'm looking at Felipe going, dude, he's got Idolo's number. Idolo has a chink in the armor this season, probably headspace more than anything. And he recovered some points in Portugal coming out of Hawaii, but he still wasn't flawless like he generally is. He looks penetrable.
Yeah. I see. You raise a great point, and I frankly see Felipe getting through the Australian leg in first place. He's going to come out of Bell's and Margaret's in first place, and he's going to have the pressure of the yellow jersey on him as we start to get into waves of consequence again, God willing that it's solid swell as we move towards G-Land and Chopu. And there's going to be and then the rubber's going to meet the road for Felipe if it's legit Chopu and legit G-Land. More Chopu. I think G-Land won't be a problem for Felipe. It's kind of a perfect wave.
Well, so this makes for a compelling season now, because you have the trading of first place, starting the season with Baron. Now Kanoa's holding it. Felipe actually won Margaret River, I think, last time we were there. So, and he could do well at Bell's. So yeah, you're right. And he really needs to look at winning both those events.
I agree.
To make up for the losses that he's going to have in big barreling surf.
Yeah, specifically Chopu.
Agreed.
That's the one where if he just gets like a ninth or something, I would consider it a success because,
Yeah, agreed.
you know,
And he would do phenomenally in El Salvador, certainly in Rio. He's a contender. J Bay, we know he's a contender. He's blown our minds there. So when I look at him again, specifically versus Idolo, I'm like, man, Idolo, I don't feel confident about at El Salvador. He's done well at Bells. I think he made the final. He did make the final at Bells. I don't think he's won it. But yeah, it's the first year where I feel like I would actually bet on Felipe versus Idolo.
they should get rid of the Rio event and have lowers take its
Agreed.
place.
Yeah,
And
that'll
then,
never happen.
as we mention every single week, the tour should finish at Pipeline. Start and finish at Pipeline. That's the dream tour. Start and finish at Pipe.
Agreed. So top 5, while we're on it, currently is Kanoa in first, Kelly in second, Baron Mamia in third, Felipe in fourth, and Seth Moniz in fifth. And what are your thoughts on Griffin, or do you have any? He's the first Californian surfer to win a CT event in 13 years, I believe.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Who was the last?
Bobby Martinez, 2009.
Kaloe's never won a CT.
Mm-mm.
And we don't count Kanoa as an American.
Well, Kanoa doesn't count himself as a Californian. And so, Kalohe lost to Griffin in this event, which I think, that's an interesting storyline that gets touched on occasionally, but Griffin is the apprentice to Kalohe. Same town, grew up with Kalohe, kind of showing him the ropes, and Griffin has surpassed Kalohe. I think as a surfer, just at large, but certainly in terms of competitive results now, I thought Griffin looked phenomenal. I mean, the waves benefited Griffin compared to a lot of the other competitors because that was very much like California. But I thought his boards particularly looked so spicy. Whatever wave he was on, small waves, when he was on kind of the set waves, all of it, it had so much spark.
Does he ride Lost? Does he ride Mayhems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, look, Griffin moved up 20 spots.
Insane.
When you look at the rankings here on the WSL website, that's the thing that stands out. A movement of 20. And frankly, he obviously had a horrible Hawaii season, but that's not like Griffin. Griffin surfs great in Hawaii. So I sense that Griffin will be in the top 5 shortly. I think
easily.
I think he moves up.
Well, I think he could do well at Bells, I mean, Bells, he's it suits him really, really well.
I don't think he has any like holes in his game regarding the spots on tour,
Yeah, I don't either. That's a good point. On the women's side, it was great to see Leki Peterson back in form. She's been struggling due to injury the last few seasons, but the semifinals, she beat Stephanie Gilmore. Tatiana Weston Webb took down Carissa Moore, and then Tati beat Leki for the finals. So congratulations to Tatiana Weston Webb. And again, because of mediocre surf, all of those heats I just mentioned and the ones before were fractional. It was people getting through heats they both had 10-point heat totals, and there was just a fraction of difference between the two of them. And so it really could have been argued either way for a number of those heats. But regardless, great to see Leki back, and congratulations to Tati.
Well, last week when we were speaking about the women, Moana Jones-Wong was sort of our discussion. Like, it was too bad that she didn't get a spot and that Tia Blanco did get a spot. And Tia didn't take advantage of the situation with the 17th
Absolutely
place.
Not.
And
she lost immediately.
This is where you start to think, God, the WSL lost a really good storyline at the very least. I mean, I think if Moana Jones-Wong got a 17th, we'd be going, see, she really is just a pipe specialist. And the thing is, we won't know. We just simply won't know.
Well, we lost 2 storylines. The WSL lost 2 storylines. They lost the Moana storyline and they lost the Tia storyline. They built an entire show for ABC, where the prize was for this person to come out of obscurity and compete against the world's best. And she floundered. And to be honest, I don't think anybody expected her to do well. Anybody who knows surfing, because I watched that show and it was like, she deserves to win this show, but she's not CT level, as whereas when you watch Zeke and Koa Smith, they were CT level surfers. Nobody else on that men's side was, but those two guys were.
Yeah. And you were telling me though that Tia gets a couple more wild cards because of the win?
She gets 3 total. So I think it's El Salvador is what they decided, Bells maybe, and Portugal.
Okay, so I guess we'll see. Really, you kind of got to give her a pass on one event, her first CT.
Yeah,
maybe she'll get it together.
Well, look, it was a freaking terrible event. The waves are terrible. The local, I forget which of the two, I think it was Afonso Atunez, didn't catch a wave in his first heat. And he's the local wild card. He did not catch a wave. And this isn't because it was 12 feet and draining. He just didn't catch a wave. Yeah. And God, there's no excuse. Yeah, super weird.
That's pretty weird.
But anyways,
I actually do blame him for that, not the waves. Dude, put on a jersey. I mean, the other guys in the heat, guess what? They caught waves.
There were waves to be caught, and it wasn't big scary waves. There was plenty of waves. I think he was like waiting for a good one, and there was no good one. Yeah. But so to Tia's point, it was a tough event. Understandable that she would lose. But man, imagine if you got to pick your 3 wild cards, I'd be like, J-Bay, here I come. G-Land, here I come. I would like to think Chopu or Pipeline, but I'm not qualified for those. No. I'm just picking based on location. I'm like, I would like to hang out in Hawaii. Tahiti, I'll be with Felipe on the beach.
No, exactly. No. We want G-Land and J-Bay, and what's the other spot that we want?
I'll sell it. I'll sell the 3rd wild card to Moana.
Maybe Margaret River. I don't know.
Moana, you got 20K from that first event, or how much was it? I'll take it. Give me half. Yeah, I think 70. So she'd have 35 to chip my way, and you have the wild card into the next event. Anyways, the top 5 for the women's event, for the women's tour right now is kind of interesting. Brissa Hennessy sits in the 1st position. Huge. That's obviously based on her sunset result largely. Carissa Moore in 2nd, Leki Peterson back in 3rd, Tatiana in 4th, and Malia Manuel, who's never won an event, but she's made 2 finals now. She's in 5th, so she's looking to better that.
Well, what interests me more than the top 5 is the cut line. The cut line is where the story is. And I look at the men's cut line and I'm kind of okay with the surprise here is Owen Wright in my mind. I know that doesn't surprise you, but I guess he's getting long in tooth.
It's very surprising.
That's the one where you're like, okay, he's at least going to be like 16 or 12 or something, like he's just got too much experience at all of these spots. That one surprises me.
It's very surprising.
Morgan Sibilic does not surprise me. These guys that are below the line, none of them really surprise me except for Owen Wright.
What is surprising though about that, or not surprising, but the conversation there is a number of these guys who came out so strong, these rookies who came out so strong in the first event of the season haven't been able to continue that momentum. So Jackson Baker's in 23rd, Joao Chianca's in 23rd. Matt McGillivray had a strong start. He's out. So
Leonardo.
And that's true on the women's side too. I mean, we talked about the rookies taking over this season and they came out in Hawaii strong. And this Portugal event, it was the same old names on top again. The rookies were nowhere to be seen,
When you look at the cut line and you look at, say, the top 5 above the line and the first 5 below the line, where do you see shifting here happening? Like Jack Robinson is above the cut line. who's going to drop? I mean, like Sammy Pupo is going to drop, right?
Yeah.
Frederick Marias is going to move up.
Yep. Well, I think both the events in Australia benefit from experience there. So if you've been to Bells a bunch, you know it well. Same with Margaret River. So that's where you'll see the shifts happening. I think obviously John Florence is known for the
Yeah,
Margaret
but I'm just
event.
looking at the cut line though. Like, who's going to? We've got two more events before the cut, and they're both in Australia. And so, who's going to rise above the
Nobody,
cut line, and who's going to
nobody.
go below?
I don't think any of those people below the cut are really going to. I mean, you're right. Maybe Frederico would be the one, but the guys below him, Leonardo, Joao, Jackson. Well, Jackson being Australian, maybe he can push past.
Leonardo has tons of experience. And you
Yeah,
look
and
at
his
guys like
surfing suits it.
Sammy Pupo, you could see Sammy Pupo dropping below the cut line. You could see Luca Macinas dropping below you could see them getting out in the 30 around of 32.
Yeah,
And Leonardo and Frederico moving up just based on experience.
yeah.
But anyway, maybe it's not that entertaining from a storyline. Maybe there's nothing here.
I mean, all of those names that you just said,
Yeah, I don't care.
I mean, I really don't care. Like, because ultimately they're only going to be battling for between spots 15th and 24th. They're not going to be battling the top 5.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's a waste of our time. I mean, again, I've said it before, but when you run 2 days of competition just to lose 4 surfers who are never going to contend for a title anyways,
Yeah.
what is the point?
Yeah.
And especially if you pick the best portion of the swell to run those 2 days in, then you're running the finals in crappy surf.
Yeah.
As a final thought on Portugal, I'll end where I started and just say that this content is not compelling enough to engage a non-core audience.
Oh,
The
there's no doubt.
content wasn't compelling enough to engage a core audience. So if their goal is to grow the audience, there's no point in running in waves that are less than consequential.
Yeah, there's simply no doubt about that. I agree totally with that. It's coming up here, it's lacking. It's weird. Okay, so let's see, April. Okay, Rip Curl starts, the Rip Curl Bells Beach starts April 10th. Where's Kelly's number 2 in the world?
Yep.
Looks like Kelly's not going to have a problem getting to Australia. It sounds as if he's vaccinated.
Why does it sound like that?
He
said he's going.
He's basically said he's going, and he said he's not going to reveal his vaccination status, but, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, I'm going, so you figure it out.
Yeah.
Which is sort of code for, yeah, I'm good. And I don't even think the COVID thing, I think it's all going to be gone. I think
it's nice to have the very first time in years that we're not questioning whether or not they're going to run Tahiti or these other events. It's like we just agree and know this tour is going to roll out and happen the way that it's scheduled. And what a refreshing feeling that is.
Yeah, and the WSL people must be excited about that too.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what's your question on Bells?
Oh, it was kind of Kelly Slater related,
So who's your survival pick?
Wow. I'm not going to tell you, but
I always think that you'll just get lulled into it accidentally.
Yeah. No, this is money.
Never. I'm putting Griff.
Jake Marshall had a pretty good run in Portugal, all things considered. 12th place his rookie season. He's got to be happy with that, I think.
Yeah, put him on your fantasy team. Put him on your survival team.
I think Griff is a good pick.
Thank you. I'll stick with it then.
Who have you chosen so far?
John at Pipe, Seth at Sunset, Canoa in Portugal.
Okay.
So given the rest of the season, I would love to still have Canoa on as one of my picks, but I accept that I picked him for the right event. So I think I could burn Griffin at Bells, Jack Robinson maybe at Margaret River. I'm not too sure about that one yet. G-Land, I might go with Kelly. El Salvador, I'll go with Felipe. Rio, I'll go with Idolo. J-Bay, I'll probably go with Jordy. Tahiti, there, I need a pick there. Not sure about that one. We'll have to think that through.
Yeah.
John, Gabriel, but I don't have them anymore. Jack, I might want for that. So maybe I'll pick somebody else for Margaret and use Jack for Tahiti. Don't know. Gonna have to reassess all of this now. Speaking of Jack, are you caught up? Episode 3 of Stab in the Dark last week?
I was watching it this morning. I'm like 2/3 of the way through. He's just now writing the Paizel. He got rid of, in episode 3, from what I know, he got rid of the DHD and he got rid of the first board that he rode, which was the JS or vice versa. Yeah, he got rid of the DHD and the JS, and he's riding the Paizel as I speak.
Can I reveal?
Sure.
To spoil it to you, since it's a week old. It really comes down between the Paizel and the Merrick. And Paizel is actually in the water with him. And I feel like trying to sway Jack's opinion slightly.
Really?
But as we've seen, Jack is true to the cause, as he was with Arakawa. He is objective, and he picked the board that he preferred, which was the Merrick, the Brit Merrick, Channel Islands.
Did he know? It's uncanny how he knows which board's which. Do you think they've told him?
No, I don't think they told him.
It is remarkable.
He seems totally sincere. So currently, based on the 3 episodes, the boards that are still in contention are the Biolis, the Chile, the Merrick, and the Pukas shaped by Axel Lorenz. And that's it, I guess. Those are the ones that go to the final. Those are the 4 boards that go to the final for episode 4 this week. I'm curious to hear how you feel Jack Robinson is doing as a test pilot versus other seasons of this series.
I think he's doing good. You know, I enjoy watching him surf. I enjoy watching how the boards react under his feet. To me, the fun of the series is watching him surf and kind of guessing if he's not going to like it or if he's going to like it.
Yeah.
And, the rust colored one, I think it was the DHD. I was like, I don't think he's going to like this board. The way that the way that the board was reacting, there was just moments where you're like, oh, and then there's certain waves where you're like, oh, the way that board fins released and then re-engaged quickly without him having to think about it. I think when you sense that the surfer doesn't have to think about the board, it generally comes in and goes, yeah, this one has a moment of zen.
I thought that the JS and the Paizel looked great under his feet. And so it's interesting to hear him come in and have criticism about those boards. Obviously, he's way more attuned than my eye is, and he's feeling things. But I agree with you. That is the value of this series, is really fine-tooth combing, like watching him on that, analyzing every little twitch, and then hearing him talk through how he's feeling, why he's feeling. And there is a lot of overlap. I am seeing a lot of the things that he is discussing, but with those 2 boards in particular, I thought they looked great, and then not great enough for him, apparently.
One of the cool things about this Stab in the Dark brand, if you will, is the ability for Stab and for Ashton and Sam and whoever is involved, Michael, to kind of change the format around. And one of the things I was thinking would be cool, and we did this with the Icons of Foam Shape Off at the Boardroom show, was have like a tournament of champions type of thing. So imagine you have 12 boards and they're from 3 shapers. They're from Brit Merrick, whoever the champions are. It'd be Paizel, I think, Biolis, whoever's won it the most, right? And I think you've got, I believe, and I could be wrong, that you have at least 3 shapers that have won it twice, right? But I don't know. Maybe that's not right.
I don't recall.
And maybe I know Paizel's won it at least twice, right?
Paizel's won it twice. Britt Merrick's won it once. I think DH has won it once or twice.
So my point is, if you can get to a place where you have, let's say you only have 2 shapers that have won it twice, multiple times, whatever. Maybe it's 3 shapers that have multiple times. You take those 2 or 3 shapers and you build 12 boards, but you don't tell the surfer that there's only 3 shapers or only 2 shapers. You go, yeah, we've got 12 shaped boards here.
And there's only 3 shapers at 4 boards each.
Yeah, or 2 shapers with 6 boards each. And this, the cool thing about this, right, is that obviously the surfer is like, oh, this is a, you know, and what it does is it allows the surfer, because this is what I think is missing, because there's 12 boards. I just don't feel like Jack's giving each shaper their fair due.
Totally.
And so with 6 boards made by Mayhem and 6 boards made by Paizel, these guys are going to get to ride the same shaper numerous times.
Yeah, it calls into question the whole thing of, like, Kelly, you know, would get 12 Merricks back in the day from Al and be like, this one's the magic one.
Yeah.
Al was trying to do the exact same thing with all those boards. He
Yeah.
just happened, for whatever reason, to nail it with that. And it's out of Al's hands a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Like, it's every stringer has different wood grain in it.
Absolutely.
Every foam blank has a different composition slightly.
Yep.
Every lamination layup is different. Fin
Yep.
placements might be slightly different, you know. All of that stuff factors in to the mojo.
And not to mention, am I wearing a wetsuit? Did I gain 3 pounds? Did I lose 4 pounds? All of that stuff. Like, there's so many factors.
So along those lines, is the board of the 1 of 12 that Kelly picks as magic today could be different under different environmental conditions. If he was riding it in a cold climate versus warm, but he's already discounted the 11. I mean, we all do that. You form that opinion right out of the gates. It's hard to break from that initial opinion. So your experiment is certainly an interesting one.
Yeah, it would be pretty fun. As a shaper, you'd be able to, okay, I'm building 6 boards, and it would just be, I think it would be a really cool way to look at it. And I know that they're always looking to throw a curveball, and that would be a pretty cool curveball.
They have more ideas than they have ability to execute the ideas.
Yeah.
The space that they're in for creating content, like this kind of long form, like they have an audience that's fully engaged and they can build whatever content they want for that audience, is awesome. They're in a space all their own. Nobody else has the resources to kind of play the way that they play, because they set up that subscription model and that's what their audience knows and wants from them. That's what they're best at. They're really in a unique space. And so the world is their oyster. It's just, which ideas do you prioritize to execute?
I'm watching Bob Dylan's documentary, No Direction Home.
Martin Scorsese doc.
Yeah, great film. Loved it. And there was a line in there where the guy says, the thing is with Dylan is that the audience comes to him. He doesn't go to the audience. In other words, he could play a friggin', bongo drum and people are going to come and see what Dylan's all about. And in some regard, Stab has that same vibe. Like, we're going to come, you know what I mean? We're going to come check it out. And until you're not authentic and honest, and they are, Stab's doing a great job with this.
It's a great analogy. The difference is people will continue to show up. Bob Dylan's been playing crap for 20 years and people still show up.
Well, that's the point.
But Stab, as soon as they drop the ball, we're going to call them out for it. Like they have their content is A+. As soon as it becomes B, we're going to call them out. And we're going to stop paying him. Whereas Dylan, I went and saw him 15 years ago. He did play a bongo drum and just growled into the microphone. And I was like, this guy's a genius. I'll take my $100. I'm coming back next time.
That's so funny you say that, because I was ignorant of Bob Dylan. I always was like, he sounds like the barber on the Andy Griffith show, Floyd, when he sings, And that's a deep reference that you'd have to really go down a YouTube channel to figure out. But he does sound like Floyd the barber. But regardless, I was ignorant of Dylan, and I still am, but I'm feeling much more open to being a Bob Dylan. I understand Bob Dylan much greater than I
Yeah.
did before after watching this. And I think I've told you in the past, all of my musical heroes love Bob Dylan. So I'm like, I guess I kind of got to like Bob Dylan, you know, like the Stones and whoever, Petty, and basically everybody is
Yeah.
like Bob Dylan's the man. And I never knew why, because I didn't grow up in that generation. And I always kind of ignorantly and with, you know, I just didn't look into it. So it's fun to be learning. I love learning about Bob Dylan, and I love opening my eyes to new things and changing the way I thought about things.
Do you have any appreciation for the folk era and movement in that music?
I have a lot of appreciation for the words, you know, his words, you know, the prose, the poet that is Bob Dylan. Necessarily the three same chords are kind of like lame, but that's sort of the format that provides for the words to take center stage.
I love all of that. I think I found other folk. My parents played for me other folk musicians prior to Dylan, like Simon and Garfunkel, let's say, Pete Seeger, you know? So like I had all of that awareness. So when Dylan entered the picture for me when I was still very young, that set its hook. And so then to find or to track Dylan's career out of folk allowed me to appreciate the stuff in the next few decades that wasn't necessarily as, like, the rock and roll stuff isn't as, let's say, good of rock and roll as the Stones, but the hook was already set with Dylan, and I appreciated the trajectory of the career and the narrative that he was building and all that sort of stuff. So he already had a place in my heart. I could overlook the imperfections of his voice and the music and all that sort of stuff. But if you start with the folk and you have an appreciation for folk, he was the best at that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing storyline and narrative. And if you haven't seen No Direction Home, which I'm sure most 90% of people have, I hadn't seen it. And it was just eye-opening. And
did you finish it yet?
I finished it last night.
We talked about this years ago. I think
I
I explained it to you, that final scene.
Yeah. That's
where
pretty
he
good.
walks out on stage and they're just like,
Judas.
Yeah, Judas is what they're calling him, because he's got the electric guitar. And then he just turns back to the band and he goes, turn it up. Yeah. And then he just starts playing what will become an anthem to that audience.
Yeah.
Like that audience was pissed because he had abandoned the folk messaging.
Yeah.
But this song was no direction home, you know, like you're like a rolling stone, you got no direction home, which is exactly what that guy who yelled Judas was feeling in that moment. He just didn't know it yet.
Exactly.
And that song became that kid's anthem 2 and 3 years down the road, and is still his anthem right now in the retirement home, you know. But he just didn't. And that's how amazing Bob Dylan was, is he was just one step ahead, creating the trend, influencing.
Yeah, he's got something. One of the guys in the documentary, one of the producers said, just look at him. He's got the Holy Spirit. And I thought that was so telling. That is absolutely true. Like there is a brutal honesty that comes out of Bob Dylan that's just it's magnetizing. You're drawn towards how honest he is.
Yeah.
And I just found it. I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan, and I know I'm late to the party, but I'm now. You know Drew Campion, the old editor of Surfing Magazine. Drew Campion, he's a friend of mine, and I one day I forget when or why, but I'm like, who's the best? And he immediately says Bob Dylan. Like Drew Campion's like a huge Dylan guy, and I'm like, I don't get it. And he's like, you're stupid.
You will. No, honestly, it's like I don't tell people they're stupid or they need to get it. I'm just like, I'll talk to you 5 years from now, 8 years from now, maybe 15. You're going to come back and be like, hey, man, I really like Bob Dylan. And then we'll talk. Well,
in honesty to Drew didn't say I was stupid. Drew he's a very sweet guy. And he was just like, yeah, Dylan's the guy, man. Dylan is my guy.
Here's my favorite thing. I have this epiphany every couple years where a new song pops up that a new Bob Dylan song that I had never heard before pops up. And I go, man, this sounds, what is this? Who is this? And then I look it up and it's Dylan. And I'm like, oh my God, I pay a lot of attention to him. I think I know his music, but his catalog is so vast and the style of music ranges so many genres that it can still pop up and I don't know who it is. And I love it.
You're right. And to speak to that, there's a song that runs during the credits that's just, I don't even know the name of it. Maybe we can close our show with that song.
Yeah,
but
perfect.
it's such a great song. I remember last night listening to it, and it's one of the folksy acoustic things. And I was like, I want to download that song, man. That song's cool. It had a really good tempo. And anyway,
there's a soundtrack he did for Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. It was a film.
mm-hmm.
He scored the whole film. It's all instrumental. And it's like that album, I have it on vinyl from beginning to end.
Really?
You've never heard any of those songs played on the radio.
Really?
And yeah. And it's just so good. It feels
is it
like
all
a
acoustic?
Cowboy.
Or has it got some country like Telecaster twang to it?
All acoustic.
Oh,
and it's like woodwind instruments and guitar. And then the couple of, I think he converted to Christianity in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Early 80s, late 80s. And those two albums, I find some real gems on gospel type music.
Oh, cool.
Like again, you never heard them on the radio. I'll send you a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, please do.
And what was I was going to say something else about Dylan. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. We'll come back to it. At any rate,
people are bored by our surf talk.
The other couple of surf related things.
Yes.
Are you following the Levi Swanson story of the last 24 hours?
I am. The Levi story is sort of the buried lead here, isn't it? It feels like.
So Levi Swanson, young, I don't know, probably 18-ish years old.
It's Slauson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Slauson.
Levi Slauson. He's a friend. I've known the kid and his father and his brother since they were, 6 and 8 years old. They're from around here in Encinitas, and they're a great family. And the Noah and Levi are great kids, or now they're adults.
How old do you think he is?
I bet he's 20. Maybe he's 18.
Got it.
19.
Yeah, Slauson. My computer auto corrected his name, but he was competing in Dominican Republic at a QS 1000. He was winning a heat. He had priority, and so the competing surfer took off on a wave, and Levi blocked him, essentially dropped in front of him to use priority so that person couldn't get the score. That person kicked his surfboard at Levi aggressively, directly, hard. The thing went to the extent of the leash and then flicked kind of right by Levi's face. Levi puts his hands up, and the board thankfully didn't hit him, but it got
it hit his arm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's hit his arm, and he has bruises on his arm.
There you go. That's even a bigger story.
According to Instagram, according to, I think, Stab.
Okay. So that then means that if he had not put up his arms, it could have hit him in the face. Yeah. But it was intended to hit him in the face. And
in the head. Intent here is the key, and the intent is obvious.
And some of those publications I saw were leaving out the other surfer's name. I will not. That other surfer's name is Magno Pacheco, and he's from Brazil. I think he lives in Huntington now, similar age surfer. And anyways, Levi took to Instagram. He posted the footage, and he said, was having a really fun round one heat in the last event before this happened. I had first priority, took off on the wave at the end of the heat, and I guess this was his reaction. He said it was a, quote, accident, but to think that what would have happened if your fins actually hit me. So glad to be okay. Thank you. Time to move on to the next event. Feel free to repost. He went back and edited the caption later and said, thank you to the WSL for taking quick action on this. So I don't think the WSL had taken action. He posted this, and then the WSL took action. I don't know what the action was. Do you have any insights? Or
I don't. I sort of just kind of like you, was randomly trying to figure it all out on Instagram, and then Stab ran a story this morning or yesterday on it. And so I don't know what the action was. What I do know is Magno Pacheco is
Mhm.
taking some time away from the tour, according to himself. Like that's, let me see if I can pull it up. But
Good.
and my gut feeling is that so I guess the big question is, what should the WSL penalty be? And some are saying banned for life. Some on the internet, some randos on the internet like you and I are saying he should be banned for life from competition. When we look at it again, intent, it's obvious. This is a professional surfer that shot his board at another professional surfer. This did not have to occur. This was not an accident. And then some of the stuff that Magno is saying is the WSL's confirmed. Okay, hold on. Okay. So this is what Magno said. He said he was stepping away from competition for a while to work on himself. I'm sorry to all the surf community and sorry to Levi and all his friends. I hope people in the WSL will learn from this and never do this mistake I did. So that to me kind of sounds like guilt. Like, why would you be stepping away to work on yourself if it was an accident?
Right. I think he was probably suspended. I mean, the fact that Levi thanked the WSL at the end of his caption makes me think that the WSL did implement some punishment. You're asking what's the appropriate punishment? I don't think full banning from contests is that's too aggressive. I would say suspend him from whatever, 5 events, 3 to 5 events, suspension, ruin his season, and that'll give him enough time to think about it. I can't assess any level of contrition from Magno. I'm guessing he's taking time off, not because on his own accord, it's because the WSL suspended him. And so I can't assess any contrition.
Yeah, but why would you be working on yourself? Like,
that's just the right thing to say.
I know it's kind of like Phil Mickelson-esque, but
yeah,
I
mean, look,
if you didn't do it, like if there was no intent, if you're like going, yeah, it was an accident, it was a mistake.
I don't think he's claiming that.
Well,
I think Levi said that Magno claimed it was an accident, but that was probably in the heat of the moment. Like they came up from that wave. Levi looked back probably and was like, what the hell? And Magno was probably like, oh, it was an accident, just blowing it off. Once Magno's faced with the footage, there's no way to claim that was an accident. It was very clearly intentional.
He's saying I was not trying to hit him. Those are his words. I was not trying to hit him.
If he's that bad at surfing, then he shouldn't be in a contest. If he's claiming that was accidental, then he's terrible at surfing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, ultimately, I grew up in an era where this was a thing, where you would kick your board, but it wasn't, I don't know of anybody ever kicking it at the surfer. It was more an act of frustration. And so you'd kick it forward towards the beach or something like that. If it was ever the direction of a surfer, you had to be more than 6 feet away so that you knew it wasn't going to hit him. It was always an act of frustration. This was clearly not just frustration. It looked intended to hit Levi.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it was. And anyway, I think that Magno's career is over, quite frankly.
Well, it's bad PR. It's like
no coming back from this. There's no coming back from this.
Any sponsor, anybody in the industry that's looking at it is not a fan of what happened there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so that is the appropriate punishment then. It's like, yeah, sure, the WSL suspends him, but the real vindication cosmically is
it's over, Johnny.
You showed your character. And the world will respond, whether or not we want to spend time with you or pay you or see more of you. Now we get a macro or kind of a micro cosm of that on Instagram, where we see somebody publish something publicly, the world responds instantly, and we get to read about it in real time. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Levi posting this, first of all, to shame somebody publicly? And how do you feel about if you go to Magno's Instagram right now, hordes of comments
I
on there
know.
just roasting him,
I
just
know.
fully online bullying him. So how do you feel about that action and the reaction of the internet?
Oh man. I feel like if you've got something to say to somebody, you should say it to their face. That's kind
So
of how I
Levi
feel.
should have said it to Magno's face
No,
and not published it.
I mean all the people that are going on social media and basically canceling him, you know, or just saying negative things to him. Like, here's what should have happened. Right away, the WSL should have grabbed both surfers on site, walked them back into a room and discussed this thing. You know, that's the problem. And that didn't happen. So Levi's like, well, how am I going to get justice? Because Levi was certainly a victim here. And so Levi just took matters into his own hands. So the, you know, in my opinion, and I'm not sure exactly what happened on site, but I sense that the WSL didn't nip this in the bud. And I don't mean nip it in the bud like pretend it didn't happen. I mean, find out what happened and immediately go, dude, let me point to rule number 17A. If you shoot your board at a surfer, you're suspended for 5 months. Sorry, you know, even if it didn't mean to do it or whatever, you know. And again, that didn't occur. And so Levi went out there and did what he had to do, which I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do. I think, you know, it's sort of what led to the WSL going, oh shit, this thing kind of blew up in our face. We better take action. You know, I mean, it wasn't even a challenger event. It was it was just like a 1,000 point event.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm okay with Levi posting this publicly. This was egregious. This was somebody stepping outside the bounds of what's acceptable behavior in society. And the authority body, the WSL, did not handle it. So I agree. Levi was fully within his rights to put Magno on blast. I don't feel great about the internet jumping on Magno and just bullying him, you know?
Me either.
And but I know I feel compelled to do it myself. And here we are doing it.
Yeah.
So I do feel compelled to see some amount of retribution placed on Magno, but anonymous commentating online and just part of that feels wrong to me.
It's sophomoric. You know, it's like, it's like nobody really has anything to say.
Yeah.
You know,
dropping a bunch of clown or donkey emojis.
They're saying a lot, but they're not really saying anything.
It's like I want the weight of that to correct Magno's behavior, but I think it's ineffective. I think like that online bullying type thing, it's like just dropping a bomb somewhere and letting it all the shrapnel affect.
Yeah, it's not tactically applied.
It's not tactically applied. Yeah. It's not sending a guided missile to hit a specific target. Right. It's like sending just this kind of flash bomb that creates a lot of shrapnel. I mean, ultimately, Magno can become a worse version of himself because now he feels victimized. You know, he did something and now there's this huge backlash and now he's going to be a bigger asshole than ever because he feels like things went, you know,
it's going to become the Joker.
Yeah, exactly. That's my concern with stuff like this, is that there's potential for that to happen because it's not a tactical retribution.
And I'm a huge fan of forgiveness, you know, like we got to forgive, like nobody's perfect. I mean, who amongst us hasn't done something that we're ashamed of and wish didn't occur? You know, and the answer is none, you know, zero of us. And so it's important to find in our hearts some sort of forgiveness. I'm not saying don't forget about it. I'm not saying forget about what happened. Yeah. And I think that the WSL's actions are the right amount of, you know, I guess retribution or justice or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And, you know, you're not going to catch me, you know, piling on Magno. I don't necessarily, you know, I'm not looking to become a friend or an enemy of Magno. I'm going to move on.
But I was worth mentioning his name. I didn't understand. Like if he was a minor or something.
He's out there. His name's out there. I mean, everyone knows. You didn't do anything bad there as far as.
He deserves to be called out by name. because for all the reasons we've already stated. I thought it was weird when people were not mentioning his name. Anyways, Joel Tudor left a comment on Levi's page that Levi deleted. Would you like me to read that comment? Because I got it before he deleted it.
Okay, what is this?
Joel Tudor said, quit crying like a wuss and pound him if you have a problem with him. Kids these days.
All right.
Moving on, I've got a doctor's appointment to see about my baby's big head. I'm going to the big head specialist today. So I got to get out of here shortly. Yeah. My must-see moment, though, is the drive-through series is back. The drive-through series was a partnership, a deal that was done with Fuel TV, and it was started airing maybe 2 months ago. I don't have Fuel TV. As much as I love the drive-through series 15 years ago, I was like, unless Fuel sends me the code to like log in, I'm not going to go through the effort to like track this thing down. But I did want to watch it. Well, apparently they now brokered another deal with Stab. So it's available on Stab. I don't even think it's a premium feature. So you can go watch the drive-through series on Stab magazine right now. They launched episode 1 yesterday. It's every bit as entertaining and good as it was 15 years ago.
Really? Does it have Donovan?
Yep. Donovan and Benji are the old guard. And then on the bus with him are Eric Geiselman, Parker Coffin, Donovan's son, Hendrix, who absolutely rips. He's not there just as the son. He's actually like a phenomenal surfer. They got Dane Reynolds. They go to the East Coast this season. They spend time with Kelly Slater. They go to Surf Ranch. So they got heavy hitters.
That sounds fun. That sounds like fun for sure.
It's epic.
Good. And
Donovan says at the very beginning, the reason why we brought this back, we want to bring back the fun to surfing. And I thought, you know what? Mason's having fun.
Everyone's having fun. What's he talking about?
I wasn't Ben Gravy fun, looks like he's having fun.
Yeah.
Ben Gravy's having fun. Jamie O'Brien's having a ton of fun. There's lots of fun to be had, but bring it back anyways.
Yeah, you can't have too much fun is what he should have said.
Yeah. Duke Kahanamoku for the week is Johnny Fain.
Really?
Passed
Tell
away.
Me more. Oh, I'm sad to hear that. Okay.
Passed away March 6th, so 3 days ago now.
He was Mickey Dora's foil, is what
he really was. He was the Malibu cowboy. He was 78 years old at his passing 3 days ago. From Matt Warshaw's Encyclopedia of Surfing, a point break genius with lightning fast feet and a wicked grin. Fain famously dueled in and out of the water with Mickey Dora in the early and mid 60s. It was a show they put on, and it was a great one, except that it left Fain in Dora's shadow, which was unfair to Johnny. He was thought of by some to be a blowhard, but from here, it looks like it was all Grand Beach theater. And if Fain hit his wave riding peak in 2022 instead of 1965, he'd be the hottest thing in America surfing. Quote, even though I was the youngest surfer at Malibu, I kept up with the older guys, and that was the challenge. That's what helped my drive. I knew that if I didn't keep up, I was gone. Later on, I got a Panama hat, and that was a big deal. If you had a certain ranking in the pit, you were allowed to wear a Panama hat and stripes on your trunks. It was like being a commander with bars on your shoulder. The hat and the stripes were people's way of knowing that you were somebody without knowing your name. They got to know your name real quick, rank and file. I was lucky because I had plenty of time to surf. My mother was a professional writer. She wrote the screenplay for The Son of Lassie, the film that made Peter Lawford a star. My dad owned and operated Malibu TV. The chores I had at home were minimal, and that helped me tremendously. While most kids were out doing their paper route or some other odd job, I was in the water advancing to new heights. I remember thinking of the Indy 500 while I surfed. I'm passing people in my Formula One car, pitting myself against the wave, pushing myself to the limit. I wanted to see how far I could go to defy the force of gravity. Only the equipment was holding me back.
Cool. That's a pretty good quote from Johnny Fain.
Yeah, rest in peace to a true original. He was also had small acting parts. He was in Beach Blanket Bingo. He was in Beach Party. He was in Gidget. He was in Big Wednesday.
Mickey Dora was in all of those movies too. Not Big Wednesday, but he was in Beach Blanket Bingo. That's cool. Well, I'm sorry to hear that Johnny passed.
Yep.
Good surfer, great stuff. Wonderful Wonderful progressive surfer for the era.
And my kook of the week,
Yeah.
Magno Pacheco, shockingly.
Magno, buddy, not good. Career over.
Do better, Magno.
He will. He's going to turn it around. He will
I don't
learn
know
from
Magno
this.
well enough to know, but
I don't know him either, but I just sense the human nature is one to, most of us are smart enough to learn and to turn it into a positive somehow.
good. Glad to hear it. I'll be looking up that Bob Dylan song shortly to play it out for us today.
Yeah, I'll try to find it too and send it to you.
I can just go to the end of the documentary
Yeah.
and Shazam it if needed.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Sweet.
Okay.
It's playing right now under our voices.
That's right. Here, isn't it a cool song?
Love
All
this
right.
one.
I know. I just came across it. Until next time, adios and aloha.